UFC Vegas 82 just recently wrapped up, and I'm going to recap the entire card. So make sure you guys smash that like button. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. We'll start with the first fight of the night and then work our way up to the main event. So without further ado, let's start it off. First fight of the night, we had Rafael Estevam versus Charles Johnson. It was, for the first two rounds, a pretty one-way fight, with Estevam's grappling pressure being the ultimate difference maker. But Estevam definitely had a crappy third round. He seemed to fatigue a bit. He was panic shooting takedowns. And this is an Estevam who came in overweight, and even the commentary weighed in, talking about how those last 2-3 pounds are the ultimate difference makers when you get into the later stages of the fight. So you can see how much he gassed, not cutting that extra two. You can imagine if he did, he might be out of there in the second round. Johnson might be getting a knockout. He was threatening at the end of the fight, and Johnson was letting hands fly. And I thought that he had the third round. But for the first two rounds, when we have full stamina between both these guys, Estevam's wrestling was such a difference maker, and his top control was there. Charles Johnson, he lost a positional battle, as I thought he probably would. For Johnson, you got to think, though, losing 3 in a row, but due to the fact that Estevam missed weight, I think there's a chance they keep him around, especially because he finished the fight really strong. I feel like Estevam's also got to move up to 135. Like, this fight and then the debut that was booked, Estevam is missing the fight because of a, weight issue, and then missing weight here. You're not a flyweight then. And you're fighting guys that are making weight, and then you're squeaking by at the end. You win in the first two, gassing in the third. I don't think that's a fair thing moving forward. So I would assume that Estevam has to go up to 35. 27, so still relatively young. I don't see him as a significant threat at 35. I think if he can get the weight cut dialed in with the grappling strength that he has, I feel like he's a tricky customer at 125 for sure. For Charles Johnson, I think we're keeping him around, man. I give him another back-end fight. Give him a striker. Can we give him somebody who's going to stand up with him, not somebody who's going to look to chain wrestle him? And I think Johnson could keep his UFC spot for a bit longer. So Estevam got the deserving win. Next fight of the night, we had Nikolas Motta versus Trey Ogden, which was the robbery of the night. Trey Ogden was whooping Nikolas Motta, and he was an underdog, jabbing Motta's face off, mixing in takedowns, and then in the third round, had absolute control if he decided to play it safe. Trey Ogden could sit in full mount and have won a clear 30-27 unanimous decision, but he chose to look for the arm triangle and get the finish. The arm triangle finish was in for Trey Ogden, but Motta did not tap, and he was still conscious, with Mike Beltran a few times telling Motta, show me that you're still up, show me something. But he's defending the choke. What do you really want him to show you? He was obviously conscious. And then the ref jumps in there and stops the fight, and Motta is clearly not out. He's freaking yelling at the ref. They're arguing. So what happens then? They score the fight a no contest to right the wrong of the referee on the side of Motta, but absolutely screw Trey Ogden out of a clear win. He was up. Go to the scorecards. Give me a technical decision, worst case scenario. And then you absolutely rip off everybody betting on the fight. Everybody got screwed. Because Trey Ogden in this fight was an underdog and won. That's corrupt. That's a bullshit call. Beltran made a terrible mistake. And this here, in my opinion, is an unacceptable stoppage. So we're now going to give a no contest. I think the fairest way to do it, because we had over 2 rounds completed, you go to the judges' scorecards and you judge the fight as we've seen. Trey Ogden deserves to walk away as the winner because he did nothing wrong and he had a fully locked-in submission at the time of the fight finish. So now we screw him out of his win money and a win? I hope that he gets his win money. I'm thinking that he will. I don't know. Let's see. I'll check Twitter. If it pops right up on the feed, maybe he got his win money. Let's see. Let's scroll through live. Anything coming up? I'm not seeing anything, and I follow a lot of MMA sources, and I feel like that would be a mainstream call. Doesn't say. Doesn't say. I don't see it. I don't see it. As of right now, I don't think he got his win money. but he deserves his win money because he got a victory, and that was bullshit. And all the bettors that were on Ogden as a dog, I had Ogden, got screwed out of plus money because of an incompetent refereeing call and a shitty call by the actual commission too. Ogden deserved the win. He beat Motta, and he should have a win bonus and a win on his record here. That's a win. Next fight on the card, ladies went after it. Ailin Perez versus Lucie Pudilová. Ailin Perez actually really beat up Lucie Pudilová for the first 2 rounds. She secured full mount, unloaded a bit of ground and pound, garnered a lot of control time. But in the 3rd round, she had no gas left. And she ended up on the bottom of Lucie Pudilová and actually was getting hit by a bit of ground and pound strikes. She definitely lost the 3rd round. But first 2 were clearly Perez's. She got a 10-8 in there, I believe, by one of the judges for, I think, the 2nd round. And she came into the fight with a black eye. Come to find out, it was someone at the Apex, someone who Perez wouldn't personally name, but I guess they're reporting that it was Jocelyn Edwards who gave Perez that black eye. Interesting. Little beef outside of the cage. Maybe we make that happen inside of the octagon. I think Perez would stomp Jocelyn Edwards. So you know what? I'd like to see a fair fight between those two. Sign me up for that next for Ailin Perez to get a little revenge, and we'll see who's walking away with the black eyes. I think Perez could actually get a finish on Jocelyn Edwards. For Lucie Pudilová, 2 losses in a row. Actually, her recent loss before this was a controversial decision loss to Jocelyn Edwards. I don't think that this warrants her being released from the UFC, though, because nonetheless, she put up a really good fight in that 3rd round, and she was damn tough taking shots from top, being mounted, and still surviving. So I think we keep Pudilová around. But Perez, she's tough, yo. She goes from, shot of her son in the crowd, and then she was twerking. She's definitely got a unique personality, but I like her style. I like her intensity. I think she's really strong. The gas tank, if you can just dial it in a little bit more with time, that'd be great, because that 3rd round was concerning because Pudilová had moments, and you get someone that's a little slicker on the ground, Perez might be getting rear naked choked. But ultimately, Perez got a win. Let's keep running up. Next fight on the card. This one. Upset of the night. Jeka Saragih knocks out Lucas Alexander. What's insane is the fact that Alexander looked clearly better than Saragih, and it seemed like Saragih couldn't get out of the way of Alexander's head strikes. They end up going to the ground for a second. Alexander pops up too fast. Way too fast. And he's kind of in an awkward position facing away from Saragih. So he gets up trying to create distance and reset himself. Saragih explodes into a massive hook, drops Alexander, and then finishes with big ground and pound strikes against the cage that knock Alexander out cold. It was a vicious 1st round knockout, and it was a huge underdog. And it looked like, okay, Alexander's the better fighter. He's got this fight. One little positional error, because it's a game of fucking millimeters. You go flat out. Jeka Saragih with a sick knockout win in the first minute and a half of Lucas Alexander as a massive underdog here. And he's winning for his small village in Indonesia, so that's pretty badass. For Alexander, he missed weight. He got knocked out. There's a chance the UFC is not keeping him around. He looks really smooth, though, and I think he's got a decent skill set. I would keep him around, but with this weight miss, I think there's a possibility that he needs to go up to 155 pounds. Maybe that's better for him. Maybe we'll have a bit more power there, and I think he hits hard even at 45. He was looking so good before it ended. Saragih, sick knockout win. But in the future, I think he's a fade. Next fight was Mick Parkin versus Caio Machado. And my pick was perfect on this fight as far as Mick Parkin getting the win, right? But as far as my hype on Mick Parkin, saying that I think with this performance, he'll go out there and really shine. He'll get an emphatic knockout, and he's going to build a fan base from this. I couldn't have been more wrong, because Mick Parkin and Caio Machado fought like 2 of the worst guys on the heavyweight roster. I believe Mick Parkin and Parker Porter is an interesting matchup right now. Now, I'm not saying that's what we do next. I actually would have loved to do Jake Collier, Mick Parkin next, but they released Collier from the UFC. So now I think, okay, for Mick Parkin, are the UFC investing in him as a prospect with 2 decision wins? This one, a competitive decision against Caio Machado, where Parkin was hit a lot on the feet. And I'm telling you, Parkin, He's a slow puncher. He just doesn't have a lot of hand speed. And I think that's going to be a huge hole in his game moving up the ranks, because here he's reliant on wrestling. He's not going to be able to out-wrestle all these heavyweights. I feel like if you want to push him to like a real entertaining matchup, like could you imagine you give him Junior Tafa in a Striker's Delight fight where we know Parkin's going to take him down? Parkin's going to try to at least. Or do we go the Mo Usman fight? Do we throw him Mohammed Usman, Mick Parkin? I like that matchup. Ultimate Fighter winner versus Contender Series prospect. From Machado, I mean, they'll keep him on the roster. He won't be getting released, but it's not impressive, man. These guys did not impress in a spot where I think they could have really earned a lot of hype in that UFC heavyweight division, because we're always looking for heavyweight prospects. Always. Parkin, to me, I'm sold that he's going to get knocked out. Not yet, but it's going to happen. I think give him Mohammed Usman. Give him the motor. Let's go. Let's throw him to the Lions now. Maybe we do it in England next year. Mohammed Usman versus Mick Parkin. We'll see. If they want to build him in England, they give him a striker like Tafa, though. For Machado, I don't know what's next. But Parkin got the decision. Next fight on the card, it was Christian Leroy Duncan versus Denis Tiuliulin. You know, early in that first round, Tiuliulin was actually landing good punches, and Leroy Duncan looked like he was in a bit of trouble on the feet. Then he garnered himself. He controlled Denis Tiuliulin in the clinch. He took his time. And in the second round, Leroy Duncan seemed to get in a striking flow state, and he starts ripping Tiuliulin apart. Nice elbow, big shots that put him out. The referee jumps in and saves him. Leroy Duncan looks smooth in that second round. Once he gets going, he has really good hand speed. I think he's an accurate puncher, and he has a slick style to him. I like Christian Leroy Duncan's skills. 28 years old, striker. He's interesting in the middleweight division because I don't think he's ready for the upper echelon of it by any means, but he's definitely not a back-ender, right? He's somewhere in the mid-tier. I think you got to give him another mid-tier matchup. Don't rush him in there against some other dangerous prospect. I know Punelli Soriano has a fight booked. Soriano, dude, the opponent, like I'm seeing him, but the name is escaping me. I could see if Soriano wins that fight, we do Soriano versus Leroy Duncan. I'd kind of be intrigued by that matchup. Let's see, though. I think he's fighting next year. I don't know when we're going back to England, but there's definitely a chance they try to put Leroy Duncan on that card and we get like a Striker's Delight type matchup for him. For Tiuliulin, because he took the fight on extremely short notice, just like a week out or less, actually less than a week out, I think that we give him another fight in the UFC. I'm not throwing him to the sidelines. He came in short notice, gave a tough scrap. I'd bring him back for more. I just think he's unfortunately one of those journeyman brawlers. Fun to watch, but definitely isn't going to beat the guys with the higher level skill sets, which Leroy Duncan has, and especially the athleticism advantage. So good win for Leroy Duncan with a knockout. Needed win nonetheless, but I don't want to rebook the Cesar Almeida fight because I don't want to see either one of them get beat, but they might. Jose Johnson versus Chad Anheliger. This was my lock of the week, Jose Johnson. And he came through with a masterpiece performance, and I'm glad that I mentioned that Hail Mary sub prop because it came to fruition with just 11 seconds left in the fight. Johnson's length was a huge factor. His grappling looked solid with Anheliger. There were moments for Anheliger, though, because Anheliger's a gutsy vet. At the end of the day, yeah, I guess gutsy vet's not the right word. He's got less fights than Jose Johnson, but I mean, he is a vet at this point of MMA. He's a gutsy journeyman brawler. He can scrap on the feet. He can mix it up on the ground. He's almost 37, though, so Anheliger's just a tough out. And he was at like a huge height and reach disadvantage, so very tough fight for Anheliger going in, and he was expected to lose by me and by many. That's why I called Johnson the lock this week, and Johnson gets the win, which gets my lock streak moving again. I'm glad because last week, unfortunately, fumbled with Pavlovich. So now what, 10-1-1 in the past 12 weeks for the locks? I like what I'm hearing with that. For Jose Johnson, I thought it was a good performance. Outstruck Anheliger, then out-grappled him late and got the submission. His length is tricky. Now, a lot of guys are going to look to pressure him, and I worry with Jose Johnson against a hard-nosed, strong bantamweight wrestler. But I definitely think he can style on some dudes on the feet for sure. He's got good speed. He's got good stand-up, and he brings a submission threat. It's just matchup specific, man. He's 28. Are we rushing him up the ranks? I don't know. We'll see. I think give him the more mid-tier guys, or they might use him as an opponent again. I don't know. Nonetheless, Jose Johnson here got a good win. It was a good performance, and it was a fucking quality lock this week. Next fight on the card was our featured prelim of the night, Jonathan Pearce versus Joanderson Brito. Good first round where Pearce was pressuring a lot with the wrestling. And then in the second round, Pearce in top position looks to actually be getting some control. I'm like, okay, it seems like Pearce is now starting to take this fight over. One little mistake from top position and Brito locks in a ninja choke out of nowhere, strangles Jonathan Pearce and gets the tap. Like, Joanderson Brito is a menace, in my opinion. Like, the fact of the matter is he found the submission from a position that was very compromised, being like flat on his back, getting touched up with ground and pound. Pearce talking shit to him. Yeah, you want to get back up to your feet? Do something. Get back up to your feet. And then seconds later, talking all that shit, Jonathan Pearce got strangled and was forced to tap out. Joanderson Brito's a problem, man, because he's so powerful and his jiu-jitsu is slick. I like his game a lot, and I'm looking forward to what's next for Joanderson Brito, who got a nice win over a hard-nosed, grind-heavy wrestler in Jonathan Pearce. So, Brito, good performance, and I like his game, man. It was quality in the featured bout of the night. Comeback win. He gets the sub when things weren't looking to be going his way. Savage. Next fight on the card, it started off our main card. If you guys haven't, smash that like button. And if you're new, subscribe. It was Myktybek Orolbai versus Uros Medic. Orolbai was stunned early in the fight. That first minute of the round, it looked like Medic might knock Orolbai out, but Orolbai has a chin, 100%, tough, garners himself, calms down, starts wrestling. And what do we notice? He's got a big strength and wrestling advantage over Uros Medic, which he consistently attacked from that moment moving forward because Uros did not have the tools to stop the takedowns. And Orolbai can wrestle all night. First round, he wins it with the wrestling onslaught, finishing on top. Second round, more wrestling onslaught. Medic's striking threat has dropped substantially, and it's like Medic is gassing. You can see it. And then Orolbai gets like an out-of-position, rear-naked, modified strangle. It was technically a neck crank because it's not like a fully positionally locked rear-naked choke, but it was a modified rear-naked choke which Orolbai got over Medic against the cage, had him tap out. Medic was getting beaten. Medic was wearing out. And Orolbai was coming. 25? Orolbai is good. I was throwing conspiracies out that he was on the UFC shortlist because he already had all his UFC pictures taken when he just takes a fight on a few days' notice. So, like, I think he was already said to be in the octagon after his win a few weeks ago at LFA. And then he comes in, real short notice spot, takes on Uros Medic and dominates. Aside from danger in the first round, he dominated. And he said he's not fighting at 170. He's dropping to 155. We got a menace at 155 to watch. I'm really excited for Orolbai's future, man. He's a tricky Kyrgyzstan fighter, and he's tough as they come. So, sick performance by him on very short notice to take advantage of a huge opportunity and beat Uros Medic, who I think was going to run over Johnny Parsons, and I actually think we should rebook that fight. Next fight on the card, it was Amanda Ribas versus Luana Pinheiro. In the first round, Luana Pinheiro was hunting down Amanda Ribas and throwing bombs. No love lost between these two former roommates, and Ribas' face was busted up. It got more competitive in the second, where Ribas started to have success, and then in the third round, Pinheiro's still touching her with shots, but she's wearing out. She's fading. Strikes are starting to land. The spinning wheel kick lands. Another big punch lands. Down goes Pinheiro. Ribas all over her with some ground and pound strikes, and the ref jumps in and stops it. Amanda Ribas showed very good chin because Pinheiro was dropping hammers, and then also showed just zero quit and an incredible gas tank because she was constantly coming, and Pinheiro couldn't keep up with that type of pace. And that spinning wheel kick was badass. Ribas got an impressive finish in her return to 115 pounds, one that she had to deal with some, stress from a dangerous opponent, but I think that's better. I think we know she takes a good shot. She takes out a girl who was unbeaten in the UFC, ranked opposition. if you're the UFC, what are we doing with Ribas? Where are we pushing her to? Do we throw her to the Lions and give her Jessica Andrade in a rematch? Or is that a rematch? No, it's not a rematch. In a first match. That's new blood for Andrade, which I kind of like. That Jessica Andrade fight intrigues me because I feel like Ribas is pretty close to the top of the weight class. And she had success at 125, as did Andrade. I'd watch that fight. I'd be open to that matchup. I think Amanda Ribas is a tricky girl to fight. I don't think she's going to win the belt. I'll tell you that straight out. And I think Andrade would be a nightmare striking. But I'd like to see it. Ribas Andrade, sign me up for that fight. For Pinheiro, I don't know. I kind of want to watch her fight Angela Hill. That would be my pick. Next fight on the card, it was Payton Talbot versus Nick Aguirre. Payton Talbot ended up winning by submission, rear naked choke in round 3. But that was not without some danger on the other side. The first round, Nick Aguirre absolutely dominated every grappling position over Payton Talbot. Like, it was not a competitive first round. And it even at one point seemed like Aguirre was close to ended up locking a rear naked up. Didn't happen. Survival by Payton Talbot. He comes out in the second round, and now he's stopping takedowns. Now he's having success of his own on the feet. He's landing good shots, and you can see that he's beating Aguirre up. He's breaking Aguirre. You can kind of feel the whole tide shift towards Talbot's side. And then we start round 3, and like Aguirre hugs him to start round 3. Talbot hugged him back, but then he's like, yeah, I'm going to kill you now. Big body kick, punches. Aguirre ends up getting his back taken, and he gets strangled after a failed takedown. Just led him to getting mounted, beaten up, and then choked out. Like, it was one-way traffic in that third round. The first, Aguirre looked solid. He made us question Talbot a lot. But at the end of the fight, it was all Talbot getting the win. I would say he's still a developing prospect at 25, so like, let's pump the brakes on how fast we rush him up the ranks. But he's a decent bantamweight. He's got like a Sean O'Malley type frame. He's got slick striking. He seems to have, for the most part, good grappling. It's just early, Aguirre did get some great positions on him, but Aguirre had awesome moments, and then he gassed out afterwards because he had to give it so much hell to like retain those positions. Like, he was surviving from the dominant positions because he knew he couldn't strike with Talbot. So good performance by Talbot. Then he ends up getting a submission over the grappler. Next fight on the card, featured bout. Chase Hooper versus Jordan Leavitt. Chase Hooper did it. He won the battle of masculinity, man. He pulled it off. I feel like the side of Chase Hooper, I always lose faith in. It's just because it's Chase Hooper. He's like a nice looking, schoolboy kid. He seems young, but he can fight. He was tricky as hell on the ground. He almost had Leavitt in an armbar. And then at the end, the transition, the reversal that got the rear naked choke, like, Leavitt didn't even see it coming. And Chase Hooper's already under the neck. And Leavitt, who's known for his grappling, ends up getting strangled. Hooper was looking for triangles and arm bars, and you'd see Leavitt would pick him up. And I think that Hooper knew about that Matt Wyman fight, and he didn't want to be a victim of a Jordan Leavitt slam. I thought Chase Hooper honestly looked evolved. He looked stronger than ever before, and his grappling positional work was nice, man. He found that rear naked choke, strangled out Jordan Leavitt. And he keeps on moving up the ranks here, man. He stays alive. Someone in the live chat said that Chase Hooper would beat Paddy Pimblett. I don't think that he would. I mean, maybe we'd watch it, but I don't think he'd beat him. I don't know where the UFC goes with Chase Hooper. Like, do you push him up the ranks now? Do you give him someone tough like a Jared Gordon? Do you really rush him up? Or are we like keeping him more towards the back end? He's only 24. Let's continue to build him. Now he's got, a couple wins put together. But when you give him somebody with heavy hands, with a bit of takedown defense, I'll always be concerned about Chase Hooper striking with power punchers that can wrestle. Always. Forever. And I think that's always going to be his kryptonite. Jordan Leavitt landed a huge shot from top, but then he got overzealous on the ground and ended up getting submitted. Maybe if he was a little more conservative, he could have got a TKO with ground and pound because he cracked Hooper big. Nonetheless, Hooper with the sub, and he pulled it off, man. The I guess least intimidating fighter of the UFC award goes to him with the win. We'll give it to him. Badass move, badass performance, crazy flexibility, and great jits. It's the co-main event of the evening, Michael Morales versus Jake Matthews. I'll be honest, at the very end of the fight, I was not 100% sure that Michael Morales had won. I thought that there was a real possibility that you give it to the other side, that maybe it's the side of Jake Matthews getting a competitive decision. Now, I thought it was 2-1 favoring Morales, but you never know with the Vegas judges. You never know with any judges around the world. Morales still got touched on the feet for sure, and I would say this fight was really competitive. Like, these guys, even though Morales got the win in a close fight, competitive fight, close skill sets, I would have loved to honestly see like another 2 rounds to maybe get a more definitive winner. Morales had that like explosiveness advantage, but Jake Matthews was still scrapping on the feet and landing punches. It was a very competitive majority kickboxing fight between these two. Morales is young. He's only 24. We don't got to rush him up. The UFC won't be rushing him up the ranks. He fought at Jake Matthews here. He got tested. He ended up winning. He came out on top. His gas tank held up. He looked good later in the fight. He had explosive striking moments, but I think slow build on him, man. He's 16-0. He's got the record where you want to really rush him up the ranks because it's so impressive on paper. It's like, bro, he's got to be fighting a big name right now. But realistically, he's getting by Jake Matthews in pretty competitive fashion. That doesn't tell me you're ready for the ranked opposition at top 15 of welterweight because there's killers. It's a killer's row. He's only 24. I think heading into 2025, even 2026 is when I'd expect the UFC to push the pedal to the metal and we really start moving Michael Morales up the ranks. Right now, I think slow build is your best strategy. Take your time with Morales. Don't rush him. I think he needs another journeyman type fight against a gatekeeper because he's not ready for the upper echelon, man. You throw him up to the better guys in the top 15, and I do think he loses. Same as Jake Matthews would because these two were close. But Morales' athleticism and improvement that's constantly going to be there, I think he's got a bright future ahead of him at 24. So young. Matthews at 29, it's unfortunate he loses, but like, even though he's been in the UFC since he was a kid, he's still got a lot of potential. Like, I still think he's growing as a fighter. It's not like he's getting starched out by Michael Morales. He's pretty decent, man. It's just the length and the explosiveness, two big difference makers that Matthews couldn't close the gap on. It was a good win for Morales, but like, I'm not oversold right now as a prospect. It's not like, yo, let's move him up. No. Let's take some time with Michael Morales, or that O will go. He will not remain undefeated. I'll actually predict that he doesn't remain undefeated. Does he go to 20-0? I'm going to say no. He doesn't get to 20-0. I think he'll run into trouble because he's eventually going to have to be breaking into the rankings heading into 2024, and I think that he might end up taking an L. We shall see. But yeah, I'll predict he doesn't get to 20-0. Not to shit in his cereal, but I got to be honest. I think he's going to run into trouble up the ranks, man. Jake Matthews, tough out. Morales, the deserving winner. Next fight on the card. It was our main event of the evening. If you guys haven't yet, make sure you smash that like button. And if you're new to the channel, subscribe. It was Brendan Allen versus Paul Craig. And what turned out to be a slaughter. Brendan Allen beat up Paul Craig. Striking was faster. Grappling was better. Had a beautiful throw in the first round, and he got ground and pound off. He sliced up Paul Craig's face. Did damage on the feet. Did damage on the ground. Threatening grappling positions. Hurt Paul Craig with punches. Rocked him on the feet in the second round. And then round 3 comes together. And like Allen on the ground, he just had his way. He was out-muscling Paul Craig, out-positioning Paul Craig. He was way faster with his transitions. He was such a better athlete, and he just looked to be way better as a fighter. And I think Brendan Allen, now we can say, is kind of legit as far as his contendership goes. Like, I feel like we have to keep it 100. I don't want to rush him up the ranks, but now is time because he just beat Paul Craig, not like in a competitive fashion. He handed Paul Craig his ass. I'm pulling up the UFC rankings next to me here because I do want to give him somebody towards that top 10. I think now it makes sense. So if you're the UFC and you have number 10, Brendan Allen, he took out number 13. We got to move him up a bit. We got to rush him up a bit. Delidze's booked for a main event, I believe, right? Yeah, I think he is. You know what? I'm best pulling up the freaking rankings here. Let's look at them in front of our face with the UFC middleweight division. Let's see. Current best MMA middleweight fighter. All right, we got to use MMA. We can't just do UFC. What do we got? Strickland. Let's see. Let's find our guy. All right, so Delidze's not booked. So Allen has said that he likes the idea of fighting Dracus du Plessis, but timelines are going to be a big factor. I can go for the loser of Strickland and him, but Jared Cannonier might be available, or do we just go in the most realistic direction? Him and Marvin Vettori. Vettori looking to hold on to that number 6 spot. Ailin coming in looking to just absolutely smash his way through. Yeah, I think that Ailin Vettori makes the most sense. That's the fight that I'm going to pick next for him. I'm going to say Vettori. Vettori Ailin in 2024. And I think it's potentially a fight night main event. Now, for Paul Craig, the opponent that I would throw Paul Craig, I hate to say it, but Brendan Allen called it, Joe Pyfer. We got to throw Craig to the Lions now. I just don't see him as a guy that is not worth building him against somebody else in the rankings. Like, if he can take out Joe Pyfer, okay, but he's not. I think Joe Pyfer is going to beat him up worse than Brendan Allen did now. And everybody might be like, bro, didn't you pick Paul Craig here? You're jumping ship. I've just come to the realization that Paul Craig lacks the athleticism and lacks the grappling speed. And ultimately, these super fast and strong athletic middleweights with power are probably going to beat him up. And then when you add into the fact a lot of these guys can grapple their asses off too, like a Joe Pyfer, they're going to give Paul Craig hell. He's not going to have what it takes. So I'll say Paul Craig versus Joe Pyfer. I'll give it to Allen's boy, Ailin the matchmaker. I'll give it to him. But I'll go Ailin versus Vettori. I want to see that fight. Let's do it in 2024. I think it makes sense, man. Vettori, the loss, but then also you add into the fact, the fight before that, before the loss to Cannonier, he kind of lost to Roman Dolidze too. Like, I know he got the decision, but it could have went against him. I think he's kind of deserving of fighting backwards, and taking on Brendan Allen, who's surging on his way up, is a pretty sensible fight if you ask me. So that's what I think is next for Brendan Allen in, you know, a great display in the main event, where he got a bonus, man. He got a nice bonus for the family. He got a 50K sub bonus or performance of the night bonus. So as far as the picks, my record tonight was 10 wins and 4 losses. I lost with Paul Craig in the main event over Brendan Allen. Hindsight, terrible pick. Won with Michael Morales over Jake Matthews. Lost with Jordan Leavitt to Chase Hooper. Won with Talbot over Aguirre. Won with Ribas over Pinheiro. Won with Myktybek Orolbai over Uros Medic, which was a short notice edition, which I was coin flipping, and then I flipped after weigh-ins. I said I got to go Orolbai, and my conspiracy worked out. Lost with Pearce against Brito. Great performance by Brito. Won with the lock of the week, Johnson over Anheliger. Very happy about that. 10-1-1 in the past 12 weeks for the locks. Won with Leroy Duncan over Tiuliulin. Won with Mick Parkin over Machado, but damn, the hype is dead. Lost with Alexander getting chinned by Saragih in a minute 30 seconds in a wild upset. Won with Perez over Pudilová. I won with Ogden over Motta, but he got robbed out of a win. I'm counting that as a damn win. That's crazy. Now, if you want to not count it, it's 9-4-1, no contest. But bro, it's 10-4. The underdog won. And then I won with Estevam over Johnson by a decision. This one is just bullshit. It is what it is, though, man. Like, what can we do? I want to boycott it. What can we do? How can we get this fixed? UFC, Dana White, this right here should have went to a technical decision. It shouldn't be Ogden going home with the loss. He should be taking a W, even if it's a technical decision win. Should be getting his win bonus, and people that bet Ogden as an underdog should be cashing tickets. That's an honest truth, and I think the right needs to be written, because it's an absolute wrong, man. It's an absolute wrong. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the week's worth of content. Smash the likes here. And if you're new, subscribe. Definitely let me know what you thought of the videos/fights in the comments down below. I hope you guys enjoyed the Fight Companion too. Every week, every Fight Companion, you know I'm bringing the heat. I'm doing a PFL one for the UFC off week next week. So I still got fire action. Daily content still coming. So make sure you're subscribed with those post notifications turned on, and not just on personalized. Put them on all so you don't miss a video. And I'm dropping UFC predictions tomorrow for that UFC Austin card in 2 weeks. So the content's not stopping. I'm telling you guys, I'm looking forward to that early prediction show. So keep your eyes peeled for that one. Sunday, November 19th. It'll be dropping. Thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate the continued support. And I will see you all in the next one. Peace, everybody.